Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for the kind words by David. The only very important piece of information that was missing in the CV, and I have to tell you because you have to find a reason for me keep smiling despite the lack of nice informations, is that in less than a week ago I got married. So that's second thing I would have said if Sergio Marchionne were here, is that I want to congratulate him for the way he represents our country in the United States. So even if he's not here, I want to stress this point because and there, before we start, for sure, a number of people in this room could discuss the issues and the topic that I was given much better than me, but I was given this task, so I will do my best to try to answer a question that at the beginning, when we first discussed the topic, was, is it worth investing in Italy? Then we said, let's talk a bit broader. Let's talk about if it is worth or not investing on Italy. Because one of the lessons also of the recent crisis is that if you want to understand very much in depth if a country works or not, the economy is only a part of it. You have to look at countries with a broader view. So I will try to go through it. In any case, the answer, as far as I am concerned, to both questions, is it worth investing in Italy and is it worth investing on Italy, is a yes. Is a yes, but is a yes that I will qualify. We will go through a number of strengths of our country. We will go also through a number of weaknesses. What is good about the strengths is that we are not taking the best out of them yet, so it's an opportunity for us. And as far as the weaknesses are concerned, I will try to prove that they are manageable. We can address all of them, and the solution to most of our problems is certainly within our reach. In any case, as the words is said in English, we have to be cruel to be kind. Let's start with the problems. We certainly are a country that is not growing enough, that is not creating enough jobs, new jobs. Second, we have a very big public debt that is a limit to our growth. And for sure, we are not a country attractive enough for the international community. So these are things that are clear. As far as growth is concerned, we have been missing at least 1 percentage point a year vis-à-vis not China or India, but vis-à-vis the average of the Eurozone in the last 10 years. It's a lot, because in 10 years, it's more than 10%. In terms of money, we lost almost 700 billion euros. We would have more than 150 million more each year just by growing at the same speed of the Eurozone. So we have to accept, we have to take into account that there is a problem, there is something that is missing. We have to build, we have to foster sustainable and sustained growth in a new way. Having said that, our growth is solid growth. I mean, certainly we have not enjoyed a growth based on over debt. We have certainly not suffered from real estate bubbles. So small, not enough, but solid growth. That's the first point. Second point, the public debt is certainly a problem, is certainly a constraint, is certainly a weakness of our country. But we have to acknowledge that we are managing it in a very decent way. Certainly, we have been courageous enough to go through the reform of our pensions. That was the real bomb around the corner for our public debt. And we are one of the very few countries that has gone through a real reform based on the new demographics of our country. At the same time, we must acknowledge that our government, even in the worst part of the crisis, has managed our deficit, our public deficit, in a very effective way. Not many countries in Europe have kept the primary deficit at the level we have been doing in the last few years. In front of the public, very big public debt, we have a private sector that is certainly less indebted than most private sectors in other countries in Europe. Households, corporates are certainly not very indebted. And if we put together all the three debts, and so we make a total debt of the country, Italy is certainly not amongst the very top indebted countries. So that's another important point. In front of this total debt, the total wealth of the Italian households is very significant, 7-8 times total debt. So there is no relationship. You cannot use the wealth to cover the debt, but a country where households and corporates are not indebted and where there is this reserve of savings and of wealth is certainly something that the international community has to take into account. And in fact, it takes it into account given the way our public debt is looked at. Another important point is that we have, and I represent this industry, in the last 10 years I've been a banker, we have a solid banking system. We have a real economy-oriented banking system that has gone through the crisis very strongly. No bank has asked for money to the government. Our resilience, our model has proved to be very resilient to the crisis. Credit never stopped. Figures say very clearly that the credit flow into the economy never stopped. Today, since a number of quarters now, the credit volumes are growing faster than in the Eurozone and in Europe in general. So this is another important strength from the financial point of view. The third weakness I mentioned before, the lack of attractiveness for international investors, is certainly true in terms of size. I mean, we have only 400 billion euros worth of foreign direct investments. Other countries that are more or less similar to us, like France or Germany is a different animal, but they are well beyond 1 trillion. But what we see in the last few years, and certainly in the last months, is a growing interest coming from the rest of the world. Before we enter into a possible action plan to foster growth, sustainable growth in our country, let me make a last point, because all of you know very well Italy, but a number of international people are not aware of something that is very important in analyzing our country. Our country, if we look at it from a purely statistical point of view, if we take the statistical Italy that comes from the average of everything, it comes from the average of the different regions of the country, actually does not exist. Because we have two very different opposite countries within the country, both with opportunities, but that are so different amongst each other that when you average them, you create a purely statistical country that does not exist. We have 9 regions in the north and in the center of the country that, if we keep them and if we consider them a European country, this country would be at the very top of the European rankings in any respect: employment, export orientation, industrialization, quality of life. We're really talking about, if not the first, one of the very first countries in Europe. Then we have a number of regions that create a theoretical second country in the country, in Italy, that has a totally opposite situations, where things have to be built, where there is room for growth by definition, because we're talking about regions that are amongst the worst performing in Europe, the least growing in Europe. But this kind of difference, so many regions above European average and so many regions below European average, is a situation that does not exist in other European countries. And it's something we have to take into account, because, again, let me say that for the last time, never look at average as a representation of Italy, because it's really an average between two very different situations that need a different diagnosis, that needs a different therapy, that have different levels of opportunities. And the South, for sure, has theoretically opportunities that are even higher than the northern part of the country, that, I want to stress it, is already one of the richest, most active, most performing region of Europe. If we want to address all our problems, the answer is, the instrument is growth, sustainable and sustained growth. So we have to try to understand whether or not a new phase of sustained and sustainable growth is possible in a country like ours. And in order to answer this question, we have to identify the main engines of growth for a country like ours, and evaluate altogether if these engines are available, if these engines are working properly, if we can accelerate these engines. Which are the engines? In my opinion, a country like Italy can base its long-term sustainable growth on four main engines. And each of them has a different performance we have to take into account. First is the competitiveness of our companies, firms' competitiveness. Obviously, that's the most important engine, and we will elaborate on it. The second is whatever is around companies, is the productivity, the efficiency of the country system. All those elements that are not controlled by companies, but are very important components of the overall competitiveness of the system. We will mention some of the elements: education, justice, etc. But competitiveness is not the only part of a long-term sustained and sustainable growth phase, because social cohesion and social dynamism, the energy that is part of the society and of the economy, are the other two important engines. So we have four engines, and these four engines have very different performances. Competitiveness of our companies, on average, and I will give you some figures afterwards, strong, good engine moving in the right direction. Social cohesion, I will give you some evidence to prove that it's a strength of ours, is an engine pulling in the right direction. The other two engines certainly are pulling in the wrong direction. One is the country overall productivity and effectiveness, problems that can be solved, but that have to be addressed because the performance today is not positive, and the dynamism, like meritocracy, mobility, speed of the decision processes, very, very weak. So we have two strong engines, two weak engines, two wheels that go the right way, two wheels that are slowing down the country.